Mississippi, Gerard Gibbard down at the Mississippi Trade Mart. We are at MEC Capital Day from the Element Wealth Studios. Joining us now on the set down here at the Trade Mart is the State Auditor of the state of Mississippi, Shad White. Mr. Auditor, thanks for coming on, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure. You know, I texted you a few weeks ago and said, I'd like to see the state auditor become the Maytag repairman where you don't have so much to do.
Loneliest man in the world.
Exactly. But every day.
I got lots of friends, Gerard, unfortunately. I've made lots of friends these last couple of years.
And every day, it's another report of somebody doing something dumb that is defrauding the taxpayers, stealing taxpayer money. This ain't hard. I mean, it's pretty easy. Just be honest. Do what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
It's all prescribed in statute and regulations and rules and policies. What do you think you're doing here? I mean, it's a serious question.
Yep.
You got to scratch your head when you see some of this stuff, and your staff. I mean,
I do.
They're the ones that
I do.
say,
I'll tell you one big general conclusion that I've had, I've taken away from the last 2 or 3 years, is that a lot of people get into government service, run for office for the right reasons, but you clearly have some people who get into public office for the perks. You know, their whole goal is to get as much for themselves out of it as possible. And they get to swan about and they get to do their thing. And you know, ultimately, a lot of those people end up not getting as much as they want personally out of it, so they steal a little bit. For me, this is about service. You know, my dad is an oil field pumper, but he taught me from a very early age, because he served in the Board of Aldermen of our little bitty town of 700 people in his spare time. You have a duty, son, to do something for your community. And so for me, that's why I serve in the military and the National Guard. It's why I serve in this job. This is about service. It's not about the perks. And you see some subset of people out there, this is about the perks for them.
It's an interesting point. It's counterintuitive, and it's the complete antithesis of the concept of public service.
Yes.
If you want to go make a whole lot of money, go do something else.
Yes,
and
correct.
do it legitimately, and the market will determine your economic fate. Don't go into public service and say, well, I'm going to figure out how I can get my greasy palms on money and assets to which I'm not entitled that belong to the taxpayers. And that's what we see. It's like, it's almost like taking the easy way out, if you think about it. It's hard to produce societal value in such a way that you can make the kind of money they're looking to make. You can't be lazy, let's put it that way.
Right.
You can be lazy and commit these kinds of illegal acts and be enriched.
That's right. And it's frustrating to watch, too. I mean, we see it all the way from multi-million-dollar investigations down to somebody stealing a TV, as we saw last week in the Hinds County Election Commission. So we see it, you know, and it runs the gamut from big dollar to small dollar. But every time, it just breaks your heart that this is happening. And ultimately, the victims are the taxpayers. The Election Commission story, I think, is fascinating. And we can get a little bit into that if you would like to.
Yes.
So, folks may have heard of Mark Zuckerberg. He's a fantastically wealthy man, one of the largest CEOs in the company because he runs Facebook, CEO of Facebook. Zuckerberg, back in 2020, decided that he was going to give millions and millions of dollars to this nonprofit called the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That nonprofit, big national nonprofit, then gave $350 million to elections offices around the country. And believe it or not, some of that money made its way here into Mississippi. Molly Hemingway is a reporter. She's done some interesting reporting on this. She's found that a lot of that money, most of that money, ended up going to blue elections offices, Democrat elections offices. And she's also found that some of that money went to pay for advocate salaries, basically, in some of these offices. So putting that aside, that's obviously a clear problem with the 2020 election. Putting that aside, we found here in Mississippi, in Hinds County specifically, they got some of this Zuckerberg money, and they bought 2 85-inch screen TVs from Samsung. They bought some PPE. And of course, that stuff never made it into the elections office. It was taken by one of the election commissioners and one of her friends. On top of that, because that wasn't enough apparently, the elections commissioner worked with another guy who had a movie and film production business. They got this guy a contract to do voting machine audits, a contract to clean for COVID, they said, to do COVID testing. And, of course, he starts submitting invoices, gets paid a ton of money, never did the work. Another person she partnered with, she had a hair and fashion design company. She also got a contract to do COVID cleaning because that makes sense, right? she submits invoices. They're false. She gets paid tons and tons of money. So ultimately, we look at all this. We arrested the 3 of them. The loss to the taxpayers is over $200,000 in this case. And it breaks your heart that this is happening in Mississippi, but we are dedicated to putting a stop to this because it's important, and it sends the message that somebody is watching, whether it's an elections office or your municipal office, whatever it may be. We are out there looking every day.
Mr. Auditor, can you share with us the procedure, sort of the policies in your office with respect to when your field workers are conducting these audits and they discover something that obviously looks like fraud and is not consistent with the integrity of spending taxpayer money? How does that work? Do they then advise their manager, and ultimately does that come into your office?
That's right. So if we're doing a routine audit and we see something that looks bad, the routine auditor who's out there, they will forward that to their manager. They then send that info typically to me, and then we talk about it with the investigations division inside the auditor's office. Those are the men and women who have been to the law enforcement academy. They carry guns on their hips. They have badges. They dig into cases to see if there's criminal activity. So for them, they'll look at it and they'll make the final determination, okay, should we take this to a prosecutor? And that's actually, all of that has actually happened in my home county, the county I grew up in. It was one of my first cases as state auditor. We saw something involving a local elected official when we were doing a routine audit, sent it to our investigators. They looked at it, realized that there was pretty significant embezzlement going on there. We then took it to the DA. He took the case, indicted the individual. We got a plea deal in it, and that person is now out of office, a felon, and has to pay the money back. So that's how the process works when it's working well.
Okay, so there's a prescribed flow.
Yes,
of how, and so they're not. The point is, the field folks are not hanging out there on their own. They got complete, full support of you, your office, your investigators.
That's exactly right.
And their job is just to report it, essentially.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's just amazing to me, though, that these people that are committing this sort of fraud believe that because a lot of these things, as you know, they're not even sophisticated.
Correct.
In nature. It's like, how do they think they can get that by?
Submitting a false invoice, for example, is not sophisticated. It's literally just lying on a sheet of paper saying I did some work that I didn't do, and you're turning it in. So how do they think they can get away with it? It's a great question. I mean, I honestly think that some people just believe there's nobody looking. There's nobody out there looking. I gave a speech on the coast. This was over a year ago. Finished up talked about what our office did, same kind of talk I'm giving to you today here, and a woman came up after it. She said, I honestly had no idea that anybody looked at this kind of stuff. Anybody was out there trying to stop white-collar crime involving public money. But now that I know that, she gave me a tip right after that. That actually led to a successful case where we ultimately investigated, and the mayor of Moss Point, Mississippi, eventually pled guilty and is now serving time in federal prison because of that speech and that woman who came up to me at the end of that speech. So a large part of my job is, running the office and making sure that we're bringing good cases forward and overseeing the final stamp of approval on these cases. But a large part of my job is getting the word out about what we're doing because it generates more tips. It generates more confidence among the taxpayers. And honestly, the biggest part of it is I hope it's deterring people out there who are stealing money.
Totally. That should be the idea. But it's amazing to me that folks that work kind of in the administrative roles within state agencies, all the way down to the municipal agencies, that they don't understand the role of the state auditor, and that's basically your job. I mean, the methodology involved with sampling invoices and as an example of an unsophisticated way of committing fraud. That's not really that hard audit work at the end of the day. It's not. It's pretty straightforward.
I'll give you another one. 2 different cases we've had identical to this in the last year. We had 2 different clerks in 2 different towns who were taking money for water payments, and there were literally cameras above them recording what they did, and they took the money and stuck it into their shirt. It ain't hard audit work if somebody will tell you, hey, maybe you ought to check that video footage. And, of course, we did. And, of course, that's enough proof right there. So Those are the cases you roll your eyes at and you think, you literally had to think nobody would ever watch that feed or that it was a fake camera or something like that. And ultimately, folks need to know there's somebody watching the video feed.
Exactly.
It's us. It's us.
That's the purpose.
That's right.
Yeah. So the only point I'm trying to make is we're not talking about Enron here. We're not talking about really, really sophisticated doctoring of the books, if you will, which was perpetrated by management.
Correct.
And you get private sector auditors that go in there. That's pretty hard to uncover, but they do, and eventually it does because they can't cover all their tracks. This is a lot more straightforward. We got a break right here. You can hang around.
Yes, sir.
With us. So we got the State Auditor Shad White down here at the Mississippi Trade Mart for MEC's Capital Day from the Element Wealth Studios. We'll be right back. We are coming at you live from the Mississippi Trade Mart for MEC's Capital Day. We've got the Auditor Shad White joining us down at the Element Wealth Studios, set up in the Mississippi Trade Mart. So
I appreciate the Hall & Oates play-in music, too.
That's right.
You know, I bet they thought I was too young to know that's Hall & Oates.
You knew it.
But you were wrong. You were wrong.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you being with us. We were just talking about the methodology and the policies and procedures that your office has published and has adopted, and how you use that in auditing state agencies, and all municipal entities, right?
Right,
you're responsible for all municipal entities.
For fraud going on there. We cannot routinely audit municipal entities, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, they have private auditors.
Correct.
That's exactly I had that question last week, and I had passed on that same information, so I'm glad I got that right. So there's a question on the C-Spire text line here, Shad, from Tim in Jackson. Does the state auditor only investigate fraud dealing with state funds, or can they investigate fraud between, say, private insurance companies competing with others?
State funds only. Yeah, so it has to be government funds, and most frequently has to be government funds that flow through a state or local entity. So if federal dollars are flying around but didn't touch a state or local entity, it gets hard for us, but has to be government funds, correct?
Yeah. And there's that's plenty to keep you busy, of course.
We find ourselves busy for whatever reason.
So how are you doing with respect to your staffing, your organizational structure right now? How are you looking there? And then also talk to us about the program you got going on to try to get people to stay in the state of Mississippi and come work for the state auditors.
Well, we're just like a lot of other employers. We have a constant need to recruit new talented people. I need new talented young auditors to come in and help me find misspending and fraud, and it's become very difficult because we have a brain drain issue in Mississippi, as many folks know. So over the last 10 years, Mississippi is one of just 3 states who have lost population. It's us, Illinois, and West Virginia. And if you dig deeper into the data, you realize that 7% of our millennial population has left during that time. That's not good. A lot of those people are college graduates. They're skilled workers. And so we're feeling the crunch. We're feeling the pain from that trend here in the auditor's office. So here's what we decided to do. We launched a fellowship program. It's called the Stay in the SIP Fellowship. For those of you who are listening who don't know what the SIP is, the young kids say the SIP is Mississippi. So you can go to www.stayinthesip.com to learn more about this. But here's the deal. The deal is if you are an accounting student and you're going through a Mississippi university, you've done a couple of years, we'll pay for the last couple of years of your accounting degree, or we'll pay for your master's degree in accounting. And in exchange, you agree to come work for me in the state auditor's office for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's going to be something that I hope works and shows people that if you give young folks who are talented line of sight on a good job, a good professional opportunity, we can keep them here. And I hope that it triggers this conversation about other kinds of people, other skills that we should be trying to keep here in Mississippi. Computer science, anything in STEM, nurses in particular. We've got to start thinking about all this because we're going to look up in 20 years, Gerard, and we're not going to have the entrepreneurs we need. We're not going to have the business leaders we need. We're not going to have the skilled workers we need so that businesses here can expand or businesses can move here. It's going to get dangerous.
Yeah, agree. It's a concern, and it's pervasive. It exists in every industry and every discipline, and we just need more folks, and we need more folks to stay here in Mississippi. And we need I'd like to see the private sector step up and implement programs like that really are targeted at Mississippians and Mississippi's great graduates. We had Dr. Jay Allen on earlier, president of Itawamba, one of our fine community colleges. We're cranking out great people.
Yes.
We just need to keep them here.
That's right.
We need a place for them to go.
I talked to a hospital.
Fantastic.
I talked to a hospital CEO in South Mississippi, and they said the same thing about nurses. They said, we're cranking out a ton of nurses. It's just they're leaving to go to Mobile and New Orleans. We got to be able to keep them here. And I asked him, what's your biggest barrier to growth? Is it you need more facilities, beds, doctors? What is it? He said, it's nurses. He said, I got the buildings I need. I got the beds I need. I got the doctors I need. But I can't fill all the beds with the patients that are wanting to come in the door and be here because I can't staff them because I don't have enough nurses. Now, you think about that. Fast forward. Think about my parents' generation. Huge baby boomer generation. They're going to get older. They're going to go to the hospital. They're going to go to nursing homes. We already have a nursing shortage. What's going to happen if we keep losing talented young healthcare workers? How are they going to get the healthcare that they need 10 and 20 years down the road? I mean, this is tragic. This is potentially tragic, and we've got to start addressing it right now.
It's a huge concern, and those who study demographics and the social aspect of that are reporting that we are rapidly aging as a society, and that we're headed for a tipping point where more in this country will be over the age of 60 than under the age of 18. And that is a concern. And Elon Musk even said something not too long ago. We're not producing enough workers, is what he said. All of that's kind of adding up. We're even seeing abroad where China, which had a one-child per household policy for decades, has relaxed that, and now they're encouraging people to.
They see the problem.
They see the problem. Japan, they're getting overrun by old people, don't have enough young people to shoulder the load there from an economic perspective.
Well, the reality, too, is that the millennial generation, which is my generation, people born between the early 1980s and mid-1990s, we are the largest generation in the history of America. But we're losing them. They're leaving Mississippi. So we've got this one shot to really get this right. If we don't get it right, I mean, this is going to be tragic. You're going to have a ton of grandmas and grandpas who grow old not knowing their grandkids because their kids moved to Nashville, Atlanta, Dallas, New York, Chicago, wherever. I mean, those are real important things for our communities. We have an epidemic of loneliness in this country, of isolation. Imagine what it's like if your family's not here, because we've been really blessed in Mississippi to have a very family-centric culture. That will break apart if we cannot convince folks my age to stay here or come back here, have their kids here, start their families here. It is a incredibly pressing issue. I think it's our biggest long-run challenge as a state. I'm tired of talking about it. I wanted to do something about it as it relates to our office. I've noticed, and you probably have noticed this too, people who have been in government a long time, they love talking about problems. They love task forces, meetings, discussions, round tables. I'm done with the round tables. I'm done with the discussions. We wanted to do something about it, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I tell you, Mr. Auditor, you and I are on the same page. I was not, in my business career, a big fan of meeting. It's like all we do is everybody's got to put their 2 cents in. We don't get anything done. And what do we mainly talk about? When are we going to have the next meeting?
That's right. We got to execute here.
That's the action item. When's the next meeting?
And it's the job of the boss to have a sense of urgency.
That's right.
You can't do everything in your office. I've got 135 people that work with me every day. They're incredible. They're talented. But it is my job to walk in like I'm on fire every day and say, we're going to get some stuff done today. And we're going to meet one time about it. We're going to discuss it. We're going to look at the data. We're going to make a decision, and we're going to get something done about it. And I found that, other government offices don't exactly operate that way, especially when run by somebody who has been in government for a really, really long time. It's just a downside. It's a downside.
We're obsessed with meeting. There's no question about it. And it seems so unproductive. I mean, just pick the phone up or go talk to somebody directly. You don't have to get a whole group together when a lot of times the issue is really between a couple of people.
That's right.
At the end of the day. It's not something that needs everybody. There are times where you do need to get everybody together. But, I applaud you for that management style.
Well, thank you.
Because I do think that is the most effective and most productive. And you bring up a good point I wanted to go back to, which is the multi-generational feature of our culture in Mississippi, I believe is truly something that's been positive for our state. And when we can't retain that, as you said, and we have grandparents whose grandchildren unfortunately have to be raised out of state, that seems to interfere with what has been a very positive and effective feature of our
It's
culture.
A core strength. It's a core strength of ours in Mississippi. I mean, we know that stable two-parent households are great, but when you're surrounded by family, it's even better for kids. You get better outcomes. The social science proves that.
That's proven.
That's why I wanted to move back. My wife and I, my wife's from Louisiana, we met in Massachusetts, and we both wanted to move back here, immediately moved back here. You know, her parents now, I dragged them to Mississippi too, so I'm reversing brain drain, just one person at a time. Got them here. We're surrounded by family. My 2 baby girls are as loved as they could possibly be. But this is what worries me, Gerard. I'm going to grow old, and I'm going to be here in Mississippi. I want my now 3-year-old and my now 6-month-old little girl to be here with me. And I know that what we do right now is going to determine whether or not they've got the opportunities to stay here and to be with me in the long run, right? So that's what gives me this sense of urgency on this issue, is that we can reverse this and we can sell the state of Mississippi. This is a great place to grow and raise a family and build a career even if you have the right resources and you see line of sight on a good professional opportunity. But we've got to talk about it. We've got to get it done.
Amen. Couldn't agree more. We just need more people to think through that the way you did in making that decision, because I know you could go anywhere and land work, and you chose to do it here. Because you believe in the quality of life and wanted to be close to your family, and I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate y'all having me to talk about it. It's a big issue.
And thanks for all you do as well, sir, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. This is a great event, isn't it?
There you go, brother. I love it. I love it.
Shad White, the state auditor for the state of Mississippi, has been our guest here on Middays. We're down at the Mississippi Trade Mart for MEC's Capital Day from the Element Wealth Studios. Stay with us. We'll